I'll ever be.
Well, everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer. Welcome to the Wasteland, a weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film. And a familiar face here with me this week is Rowan Wood, who's been on this show probably more than anybody. And it's always great to have you. Thank you, Rowan.
Of course, happy to be back.
And before we get started, shamelessly plug whatever you would like to shamelessly plug for all these wonderful people.
Well, I think what would be most appropriate to shamelessly plug here would be Rowan in the Wasteland, a podcast that I do with Mr. Kanto here on a week-to-week basis. Every week we talk about a film, and then basically talk about the film in the larger scope of film in general. So if we talk about our favorite, if we talk about, for example, to use an example for an episode that hasn't come out yet, if we talk about the Battle of Algiers from 1966, we might talk about Italian film in general.
Yep.
After that. And it is a lot of fun. It's available on all the podcast streaming platforms as far as I know. Definitely go and check that out, especially if you like what you hear here today.
It is one of my favorite things that I do. So, and I'm not just buttering Rowan up here because I have him on the show today. It legitimately is. It's a lot of fun. I think it's a fun format that we came up with. And honestly, it gives me a good excuse to get stuff off of my watch list. And I was just recording. So I cheated and interviewed myself for this week for Lost in the Wasteland, just to give myself a break trying to figure out something. Mm-hmm. And my most anticipated film I haven't watched up to this point is Memories of Murder. And I have an excuse potentially soon to watch it.
I just got the Criterion version, so
even more. I also did too, so now reasons to watch it. I have to reorient myself as I've had to expand and now have a different setup because I now have 4 of these racks for movies.
You're a madman.
Huh?
You're a madman.
I am a madman. I'm a madman, not for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I don't know if I want to meet that person. But if you haven't tuned into this show before, there are 3 segments we will be doing coming attractions for the week this releases, which is Friday, October 28th, so AKA Halloween weekend. So there's definitely a horror film coming out, Pray for the Devil, which I've been seeing trailers for that for 2 years.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lionsgate. And I'll hopefully be checking it out at some week because I usually get screeners from them because they're awesome. Mm-hmm. And then we'll go over our feature film and then do some recommendations. But for the actual coming attractions, besides Pray for the Devil, which is neither of our picks, because no thanks. There are 2 widening and expanding releases of Tar and Till. So those are 2 things, but we each have something different. Rowan, what are you looking forward to?
Well, I am most looking forward to, I suppose I should start by saying when your favorite director does something new, I feel like that's always going to take precedence over anything else. Mm-hmm. And this week, Guillermo del Toro has a new Netflix anthology short series coming out. There are 2 episodes every day from October 25th through the 28th. And it is called Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. Each episode, of course, is a brand new story with a brand new cast, usually a pretty stacked cast, and with del Toro involved in some way. I've been hearing a lot from the people that have been working on the show about various things that teasing various things that could happen. And I just, I am just ridiculously excited any way you spin it, because if del Toro is involved, I know it's going to be at least noteworthy.
Yeah.
And he hasn't directed any of these episodes as far as I know, but he does have some fantastic people behind the helm, both on the writing and directing side, and a cast that includes Tim Blake Nelson, Dan Stevens, F. Murray Abraham, Crispin Glover, Rupert Grint. Honestly, some pretty incredible actors. So I am excited, as I always am when del Toro comes out with something new. And then we got a new film from him in a couple a couple months. So I'm excited very much for both of us.
I am looking at the directors, and 2 that stood out to me very, very, very quickly are Panos Cosmatos, who did Mandy with Nick Cage. So very excited about that one. And Jennifer Kent of the Babadook and the Nightingale. So I'm definitely very interested in checking that out. I didn't know
I would
much
add one
about that.
more. Yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
I would add one more name to that list there, and that's Guillermo Navarro, who has been Del Toro's cinematographer ever since he started. So this is a man who's worked with Del Toro very closely on most, if not all, of his projects. So
There you
he
go.
definitely has a sense for what Del Toro's films at least look like. So I'm very
Got it.
excited for that.
Two Guillermo's, Too Furious.
Yeah.
There we go. I also want to throw out, this is coming out on Netflix this week, but came out in theaters last week, is Wendell and Wild, which I've gotten a chance to check out. Had such a blast with it. Henry Selick, stop motion animation, co-written by Jordan Peele, has Key and Peele in it, so a lot of fun. But the movie I'm most excited about is Armageddon Time, and the main reason for this one is I'm a huge fan of James Gray, and especially ever since I saw Lost City of Zed, I was really impressed by his work. So I got really excited to see when like Ad Astra was coming out. I got very excited for that as well. And I love Ad Astra. And I'm very excited to check out Armageddon Time. So starring Anne Hathaway, Jeremy Strong, and Anthony Hopkins. So there's a lot of great actors in this film as well. It's a good old fashioned generational American dream tale drama. Feels a little bit different than the other two films that I've seen from James Gray, but those two films are very different too. I also have to give James Gray credit for making me actually believe in Charlie Hunnam. Because I used to hate him because of Pacific Rim. Honestly, right. I did not like him in that at all, and had never seen what's the show? Sons of Anarchy. So I hadn't seen him in that. But when I saw Lost City of Zed, I'm like, dang, Charlie Hunnam can act. And now I'm a believer. But it's an interesting weekend of movies coming out. And the least interesting one is the Halloween one coming out for Halloween. So there you go.
I always forget the title of Pray for the Devil when I'm in the theater. And I like, there's always this thing in the back of my head saying, I've seen this trailer before. I've been seeing it for a long time, and it still does not look any better.
It feels like your run-of-the-mill Exorcist kind of movie. Yeah. Except they're like, it's a woman.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's 2022. I don't know. Obviously, there's still a lot of sexism in the world, but I don't think that's as big of a selling point in 2022 as it probably would have been 15 years ago, where it feels like this movie was made.
Yeah, exactly.
It definitely feels like one of those like late 2000, like early 2000 teens, late 2000s movies. But we're getting it finally, so I don't have to see the trailer anymore.
Yeah, thank goodness. It's like Morbius.
God, I actually talked about Morbius in my Black Adam review. I'm like, Black Adam's definitely not the worst comic book movie this year. Thanks, Morbius. So there you go. Black Adam's a lot better than Morbius. Lot better. Still dumb, but still a lot better. But we're here to talk about Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of a Crystal Skull, which I feel like this film brought on a new dawn in Spielberg's career after seeing this past like stretch of films between AI and Munich. I got a whole new appreciation after watching them again. And I really think that's probably the most underappreciated time in Spielberg's career. And now this is starting a very interesting part of Spielberg's career, where it's either he's doing these really family-friendly films that still might not be like, they're not like super kid-y like this and Tintin and the BFG, but also, you know, running the gambit with like Bridge of Spies and Lincoln and The Post, where it's just like coming for the Oscars, which I still really enjoy those films a lot, probably more than other people. But this was an interesting choice coming back to Indiana Jones. And I was watching this, and my wife was still up when they threw him out of the car, and she's like, Harrison Ford's so old. And I'm like, he was in his 60s then. Now he's 80 and he's doing another one. So, but Rowan, you have an interesting experience with this. So tell the people about your experience with Indiana Jones.
So up until a couple days ago, I had only seen Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I had been looking for an excuse to watch all of the rest of the Indiana Joneses like after that, because, you know, I've heard at least Last Crusade is great, and the others are certainly noteworthy. And so this invitation onto this show was what prompted me to sit down and marathon the other ones that I hadn't seen. I gotta say, do not recommend doing that in one day. But Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was definitely the place to end it, because it was the most lively in-movie discussion that my friends and I had while we were watching this. Because I knew, like, I had an idea of what to expect, but even that just did not measure up to what this movie eventually came to be. And to speak on the point where you were talking about a second ago, Shane, about Spielberg sort of being at like a weird time in his career right now, I feel like the late 2000s, early to mid 2010s is him basically trying what he had never tried before, and trying to sort of get in those demographics, like, oh, you know, no one's really adapted Tintin in, you know, to the silver screen in a great comprehensive way. Let me give it a try. Or, you know, Roald Dahl adaptations are kind of hit or miss. Let me put my 2 cents in there. So he's, you know, I can't fault him for trying. I personally am not that big of a fan of the BFG, and this Indiana Jones movie is kind of, you know, kind of not great. But it's better than Temple of Doom, in my opinion. But yeah, it's just it's pretty bizarre, and it's not a bad thing. It's just I can respect him for trying, even if I don't particularly love the end result.
And that's fair. And like this particular film, you know, South Park did their whole entire commentary on this film was with basically like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg raping Indiana Jones, because it's just like, we brought you back because we want money. And on some level, I don't feel like this was a shameless cash grab, in the sense of, there weren't Nazis again. They weren't hunting like religious artifacts again. Obviously, it still hits that like formula of Indiana Jones, but like at least it's like, hey, there's communists. It's the Russians, aliens, and okay, I have something really big like to get off my chest about this, because this really bothers me when people are like, they jumped the shark. Why would they have aliens in it? Have you watched the first 3 movies of this? There's literal like the Ark of the Covenant sending out evil spirits who melt peaceful faces. And there's like a knight who's been alive for thousands of years. And there's like dark demonic possession and shit. Like, aliens aren't that weird in the context of this. So like, that bothers me when people complain about the alien part of this. I'm like, who cares if it's aliens? Like, it's different. It's weird. Indiana Jones is weird. It's a fantasy adventure.
Why did it have to be aliens?
Why? If you're going to complain about anything, that's like the least thing you should complain about with this movie. Some of the things that stick out to me about this movie, I think the biggest drawback is, one, way too much CGI. They really rely on CGI.
Start off with a CG prairie dog, for Christ's sake.
Yeah. Come on, man. Just get a little prairie dog. Use some footage or something. Yeah, right. Use like a documentary.
Yeah, license some from David Attenborough.
Exactly. They could definitely do that stuff now because Disney owns everything. So you get all kinds of Nat Geo stuff. Listen to that, James Mangold. Hopefully you don't have CGI animals like that. But who don't interact with humans. So why do they have to be CGI?
Yeah.
So you have a lot of CGI, the jumping of the shark moment where it's like, one thing I do complain about this movie is the whole nuked in a fridge.
I did not expect that, and I was laughing out loud when he got, because I guess lead is magic now, right? I guess lead can help out with anything.
So lead stops radioactive material. I don't think lead is a good cushion
Yeah,
to be yeeted across the desert.
right.
This is where I feel like they pulled Live Free and Die Hard and kind of made Indiana Jones too indestructible. Because, like, here's the thing: John McClane and Indiana Jones have one thing in common. They're vulnerable heroes that we can relate with, and they get their asses kicked all the time.
Yeah.
This movie kind of throws that out the window. Did we need Shia LaBeouf swinging with CGI monkeys? Probably not.
Oh boy.
But in general, this film feels more harmless, and apparently it's very offensive to a lot of people, but I don't find it very offensive. I just feel like this is a harmless, inoffensive, like, we want to make a sequel, so
Might as well go for it.
here's a sequel. And there's certain people that, like, there's a lot of talented actors in this movie.
Whether they're
Hurt.
talented in this movie is something entirely different.
Well, and that was about, so you have John Hurt, you have Ray Winstone, you have Karen Allen, you have Kate Blanchett, you have Shia LaBeouf. Shia LaBeouf was in a weird period this time because I feel like this was in between us being like Shia LaBeouf's like this annoying young kid from Transformers and even Stevens before us realizing he's actually a really talented actor. But like, there's a lot of talent in this movie. Were they great in this? Some of them no, and some of them were completely wasted. So you really couldn't tell.
Yeah.
So that's the unfortunate thing, is they do have a lot of talented actors in this movie. And realistically, I would only say Harrison Ford and Shia LaBeouf have a whole lot to work with in this movie, and that's about it. Everybody else kind of feels like they're just there.
They all stick to the one thing that they're given. Kate Blanchett is the accent and sometimes the sword. John Hurt is like the crazy-eyed. Ray Winstone is the, like the backstabbing ally type thing. They're all put in boxes.
Yes, and they don't leave their boxes. And it's hard not to compare this to like the other Indiana Jones films, but like, there's no Sala. Nobody is as fun as Sala and makes as big of an impact as John Rhys Davies.
Yeah.
Nobody makes as big of an impact as like Short Round, as memorable as his dynamic with Indy. And like, even Marcus Brody in third one is so fun. It's just like, none of them leave that much of a lasting impression in this. And I feel bad for Karen Allen because, like, I think it's an interesting idea bringing her back. And I think it's an interesting idea of, like, come on, Indiana Jones definitely slept around. So, like, It wouldn't be surprising that he has a kid with somebody.
Right.
And I just feel like they wasted Marion. And, like, you can tell they're like, we're definitely going to set up a young Indiana Jones spinoff. But then they realize the backlash of this and they're like, nope. Sorry. Instead, we're getting 80-year-old Harrison Ford in a fifth one. I have so many concerns.
80-year-old Harrison Ford, stunt double more accurately.
Yes, there you go. Stunt double of 80-year-old Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
But Rowan, what were some of the things that stood out to you that you either really enjoyed or actually liked about this movie?
Well, I did appreciate the bold strokes. I appreciated that this movie went for it, and I do feel like they sort of skipped a step from the religious artifacts to the to the aliens and such. Then again, it had been almost 20 years since the last movie. So if they are going to bring it back, and if they're going to bring back these characters, it might as well be surprising, and it might as well be just absolutely batshit off the walls. And I do respect that. And I always love Harrison Ford, even though he has not really had a glow up from Last Crusade to this. I do think that he's still pretty fantastic, and it's clear that he cares about this character. I know it's a whole thing. Everyone knows he doesn't really love Star Wars. He doesn't really care about Han Solo. Indiana Jones is the one, is the character that he would much prefer to come back to, and it really does show, especially here, and I'm sure it'll show in the fifth one as well.
Yeah.
But I think Karen Allen and Cate Blanchett are great too, especially with what they were given. And I love the 50s theme. I like that they did an accurate jump in time. So we get the opening with the hound dog, with the kid trying to race the military vehicle. That was fun. And in the end, this movie is more fun than not. And I think a lot of that is because of those bold strokes, and because it really does commit to all of the insanity, even though it doesn't love to explain certain things. Just like this movie sort of skipped a step in getting to the aliens, I feel like it skipped steps within the plot, of in terms of reasons to go to certain locations. And maybe that's, it's an adventure movie. They need to switch up locations pretty much every 15 minutes to keep things rolling. And I also just think it's so funny how much they all survive in this movie. Especially, I feel like him surviving the nuclear blast in the fridge is what sort of kicks it off, what kicks off the completely unrealistic chances of any of the main characters dying at any point. Midway through the movie, when things started to get really crazy, my friend turned to me and said, this is all a radiation-induced dream, right? He's still in the fridge. And I thought that was hysterical.
There's an actual online theory that that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems so weird.
Yeah.
But then is it that weird? To be honest. And I like the fact that there's fun to be had here. There's a lot of adventure. There's it's an adventurous kind of film, and they do all kinds of fun hijinks and stuff like that, whether it's riding a motorcycle through a library at a college. And one little side note, I do like the nod to the Wild One, when Shia LaBeouf's mutt shows up and he's dressed up like Marlon Brando from the Wild One.
Yeah.
Very key indicator of what this character is going to be like. And, it does really play into the 50s setting. It had some nods to the other films. It was a nice little moment with Jim Broadbent, right? Where he's just them missing Dad and Marcus, and they have the little pictures of them. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest disappointment of this movie for me personally was that I didn't get more Henry Jones Sr. and Indy interacting.
Right, because Sean Connery was alive when this movie was made. They could have easily had him in it. I guess it was for fear of overcomplication, but still.
No, he retired.
Oh, okay. All right.
So Sean Connery had been retired from acting since League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And he did not. He was offered a couple of things and refused to come back. He refused to come back in Skyfall because he was supposed to be Kincaid at the end that Albert Finney wound up being. I would have lost my mind if I was sitting in that theater watching Skyfall and Sean Connery showed up. But he said it would have been distracting, which, to be fair, would have. That it's but aren't you James Bond? So why are you this other character? But I do on some level, I wish that he was in it. Miss Sean Connery, because that's that legitimately is my favorite part of any Indiana Jones film, is their dynamic with each other. And that's the thing too, you get a new dynamic in this. You get a father-son dynamic even before you know that they're father and son. And I'm sorry that I'm spoiling that, but this movie's how many years old, and it's really obvious.
Right.
It's 15 years ago it was obvious watching it. It's still obvious now. if you watch it for the first time. You're like, did you know that they were father and son before you watched this?
I definitely saw something a couple of years like so the way that I knew about stuff happening in this movie was because of the Lego sets, because I saw the Lego sets around the time that this movie came out. I was very young, and like a couple years later too. And so I was very young, but some of those things stuck with me. And I think one of the things that stuck with me around that time was the fact that that Indy had a son. I didn't know specifically that it was Mutt, but I mean, come on, I could tell.
Yeah.
They don't really try to hide it that much.
Yeah, it's like, it's pretty obvious that's what they're getting at here. Because why would you just have some random kid show up who happens to be like looking for Karen Allen's character? Because like, but why? Why wouldn't it? Because of course it's his kid. But you know, I stand to this. I think it's an inoffensive and just silly, fun fantasy adventure. I guess science fiction. It has aliens in it.
Right.
Movie. So like, that's how I feel about it. Like, I don't hate this movie. I've never hated this movie. I know people who hate this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's
like,
it's so not worth hating though.
No, it's
There's
just like
so much worse stuff out there.
It's like, you ruined my childhood. It was like, no, you can still love the other Jones movies.
Yeah.
I do, when I was ranking this, basically with like my Spielberg picks, this is towards the bottom of my Spielberg films I like. And there's only like 4 or 5 at most that are ones I didn't like. Mm-hmm. So like, it's probably low on there, but it's still a Spielberg film, so there's still fun to be had. And I can guarantee you this is probably going to be in my bottom 10 of Spielberg films, because that's tough to decide what's going at the bottom, honestly.
Right.
I think the one that's all the way at the bottom, which I'm pretty sure you were on this episode all the way back at the beginning, was that made-for-TV horror movie.
Oh boy, which one?
Were you on for that one?
Was it Duel?
Something Evil.
Oh, Something Evil. Oh yes, I was on for that one. That one was boring as hell.
That is my bottom.
Yeah.
All the way at the bottom. So Duel's still pretty high up there, because I love
yes. Yeah. I was about to say, I don't know, like, I remember us having a great discussion, or no, wait, I wasn't on that episode, was I?
No, my brother was on.
Yes. But I watched it before you did it. And I remember really liking it. I don't know how you could possibly have it near the bottom. But then again, you know, Spielberg's done a lot of great movies, so you never
Well, no, because this is your 5th Spielberg episode you've been on. So.
Makes sense.
And you're going to have a 6th, because I'm going to have both you and Foster on for the Fablemans. That's going to be a fun one. I look forward to that.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's going to be probably higher on my list than Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but I haven't seen it yet, so we're going to find out.
Don't speak too soon.
Don't speak too soon. But Rowan, do you have any other thoughts that you want to throw out there about this one?
Well, I think there is something, the biggest thing lacking in this movie for me is that the sort of the magic of, I guess the Indiana Jones franchise is really about, at least the first 3, you know, to a lesser extent, Temple of Doom, but still, it's about the magic of the past. Yeah. And it's about, you know, like, what can we learn, and, you know, like, what lessons can we apply in modernity from, you know, the mistakes and the artifacts of the past, and what lessons do they teach us, yada, yada, yada. And that's just really lacking in this movie. You know, there's not that at all, because it's about finding a crystal alien skull that's magnetic when the plot needs it to be. And there's not really much beyond that. But, you know, not to say that that's bad, it just feels like a betrayal of what makes the franchise great in the first place.
And you know what? It does lack that magic. And I was going to say that too. It just doesn't have the same kind of spark to me about it. And you bring up an interesting point too about the past, because obviously this really isn't about the past, because what they wind up finding is interdimensional aliens and stuff like that, who basically handed humanity knowledge.
Why not?
And it's a different vibe. In that way, I can see, like, inherently, I don't have a problem with aliens, because a lot of the other stuff in the series is weird. Right. But I guess from like a thematic standpoint, I guess that does leave some things lacking, because the other stuff is really, like, especially the Grail, faith and it's not really a whole lot of faith going on with a bunch of aliens.
No.
And that's, I guess, you take that faith-based influences out of the series, because all three of the old ones were based off of religions and stuff like that. So, like, I guess you are missing that piece, and I'll be interested to see what they do with the fifth one.
Definitely.
I think they might lose me if one of the rumors comes out to be true, that time travel.
Yeah, I remember that was when he had the motion capture dots on his face, right?
And I'm like,
I don't know. We'll have to see.
unless it's a flashback,
Right.
which, like, that wouldn't surprise me. But, like, if they do wind up doing, like, time travel, I'm like, well, they really went there.
Yeah.
I'm confident. I feel like they picked the best director they possibly could to capture the old school Hollywood feel of Indiana Jones, because James Mangold does that perfectly. Between, like, Ford v Ferrari and 310 to Yuma and Logan, like, I can see him being able to do that. Right. So I don't have worries about that. I am concerned for the health of Harrison Ford. I'm surprised he made it out. Right. And now he's going to be in Marvel movies.
Yeah, good for him. I'm sure I don't expect the conviction from him that I expected from William Hurt as General Ross, but I think he'll be fine. I feel like he's doing this for the paycheck, and if he, like, he'll at least be he'll at least be doing pretty well when he first appears. I don't really know how he'll be down the line when he makes his fifth or sixth appearance, but we'll see. I'm excited nonetheless.
Yeah, he is pulling Expendables 3, except Bruce Willis left because of money. Him just, like, sliding right in there to another franchise. But those are our thoughts on Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It's time to leave you with some recommendations, because I don't know if I would recommend this one. But Rowan, what would you like to recommend to the lovely people listening and watching the show?
Well, I have recently, so this is, as I love to do on the show when I recommend or when I preview things, I'm going to cheat a bit. I'm going to do a preview / recommend for something that is coming out later this week that I was incredibly excited for before I saw it. I am located in the New York City area, and they have screenings at some theaters for streaming films that have not yet been released on streaming services yet. And so I recently saw, actually not recently, this was almost 20 days ago, I saw All Quiet on the Western Front, the new Netflix adaptation of the classic novel, which was then adapted into a film in the 30s and is now being adapted again almost a century later. This is a film about World War I, the apparent war to end all wars. And it follows a group of German soldiers on their way to the front and basically through the entire war. This is one of the most intense films I've seen all year. It is very harrowing. And it's just a wonderful, not wonderful, that is a terrible word to describe this movie. It is an engaging juxtaposition between like the needless loss of life in wartime. We get that perspective from the young German soldiers, and the bureaucracy that acts too slowly to really make change happen to save those young lives, because occasionally we will cut back to the German ambassadors negotiating with the French to end this war and save the lives of the characters that we're following. And yeah, I mean, I saw this on October 7th, and I've been thinking about it really ever since. So definitely check this one out when it comes to Netflix this week. It's very long. It's 2.5 hours. And it's very intense, but it is very much worth it. Definitely, if you enjoyed the book. I've never read the book, nor have I seen the film from the 30s. But it does make me want to read the book now, because it just seems like this is a very important story. And I've heard that the book does not tell you that they're German soldiers until the very end, so you sympathize with them up to that point. And this movie, it would be very difficult doing, executing a film that works that way. But it still works remarkably well, because just because we are following them from the start, we're inclined to like them, even though we know, they were the ones fighting against the Allied force. Well, not Allied, I guess it wasn't World War II yet, but the the other European forces
Yep.
in the war, but it wasn't their fault. It wasn't the fault of the characters that we're following. But it's just absolutely fascinating, riveting, strong recommend from me.
Go. I'm hoping to get to check it out sometime this week because I should be getting a screener. So I'm excited. There's been with 1917, there's some great World War One movies out there. Paths of Glory is probably my favorite, but 1917 is definitely up there. I'm looking forward to checking out this one. Now, I have two recommendations. One is a film that Rowan and I saw yesterday together. Black Cat, just kidding. The Banshees of Inisherin, which this movie is so Irish, so Martin McDonagh, and I loved every single second of this movie. I laughed more than I did during most regular comedies that I watched this year, and I felt a lot watching this movie. And it had some great thematic work throughout it. It had amazing performances. The four main actors in this movie, obviously the two main ones, Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, are great. Carrie Condon, loved her in this. And is it Barry Keoghan?
Keegan, I've heard Keegan, I've heard Keoghan, I've heard Kean. Honestly, I don't know.
I'm not very good with Gaelic, so there we go. But my God, he's something else in this movie. And there's a lot of other great supporting characters. And it has some really shocking surprises in it along the way and some darker turns, which you should expect from a Martin McDonagh film, because if you don't, then you haven't really paid attention to any of his movies. But honestly, I've been sitting on this all last night and this morning. It's my number one movie of this year. And I was so happy that I got to see it. And especially with three of my friends from Sip Pop, including Rowan.
I also very much enjoyed the Banshees of Ed Sheeran. Thought the performances across the board were fantastic. Again, I laughed far more than I was expecting to, because I've only seen one Martin McDonagh movie up to this point, and it does make me want to watch more.
Yeah, what have you seen in Bruges? Is that the
No,
one?
it was three billboards that I've seen. That was when I first sort of got into the Oscar viewing. I kind of wish I hadn't seen that one, because that one bummed me out for a couple days.
I
was relatively young when I saw it, because I saw it when it came out, which was 5 years ago at this point. But
yeah, for a teenager in high school, that's probably not kind of movie. For a teenager in high school, none of these are really appropriate. But probably Seven Psychopaths is the easiest one to get into, because it's legitimately the most dark comedy of them all. I do feel like it's the least dynamic of his films, but I love all four of the features that he has. In Bruges is amazing. I was like, what are you going up in that tower? They look like a herd of elephants. They have some very not great things to say about Americans in Bruges. Honestly, the whole entire movie, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, is just a whole bunch of bad stuff about Americans and Martin McDonagh's perspective on America. So there you go. It was really cool seeing his perspective on Ireland, though, and I really enjoyed that a lot. And then, keeping things light here, my other recommendation is City of God, which, don't watch this movie if you don't like tension or like dark themes and ideas, because this really is about crime completely penetrating the lives of everyone in Brazil, and mostly focusing on a group of kids. And you see some messed up stuff in this movie, but it's so thrilling and impactful, visually arresting. It's so well directed. It's a little too bold for me in terms of like its story structure and stuff like that. I feel like sometimes it's going a little all over the place, but it's still really intense and really impactful film that it's hard to watch, but it's definitely worth the investment. Rowan, have you seen City of God?
I have not seen City of God. No, I tried to get to it before it left HBO Max recently. Have not gotten to it yet, but I've heard some great things.
There you go. But that's the show. So we did coming attractions, we talked about Indiana Jones, and left you with some recommendations. But Rowan, thank you as always for coming on.
Always happy to. I very much enjoyed today's discussion.
And Rowan will be back in 2 months at the end of the road of Spielberg
Yes, I will.
on this show, which is crazy because I'm down to my Elite Eight. By the time this episode posts on Friday, I'll probably be at my finals for
Wow.
selecting who is going to be the next director. Is it going to be, throwing this out there, is it going to be Quentin Tarantino, Wes Anderson, John Carpenter, Akira Kurosawa, Alfred Hitchcock, Hayao Miyazaki, David Fincher, Alfonso Cuarón? You'll have to find out. And come January, it'll be a whole new director on Welcome to the Wasteland. But time to enjoy the last 2 months of Spielberg. And thank you again, Rowan.
Happy to join as always.
And thank you all for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.